Hello and welcome to the Summer of Best Ball with yours truly, Justin Herzig. All throughout the summer, I'll be hosting an Underdog Best Ball stream and bringing on some special guests. You can catch us every Tuesday, Thursday live on the ETR channel, hosted in partnership with the Owners Club, a new way to play best ball and fantasy football. And today, we have some of my favorite guests joining us from directly the kind of producers, the host, the voice of Underdog, bringing us live shows, bringing us some great content, bringing us some great analytics from previous years. Starting off, we have in the top corner, Josh Norris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Justin. I've been grinding Marcus Mariota starts from the 2018 season in preparation for the show. So I'm excited to bestow some of this knowledge that I've picked up from his starts against, the Jaguars and all that type of stuff over the last few years.
That's fantastic. And then joining us as well, also from obviously the Underdog family, fresh off the shaves. Look at that. Looking so clean. Always looking great. Mr. Hayden Winks, great to have you as well.
What's good, Herzig? I was wondering if Josh was going to be doing some of the analytics, the best ball analytics.
Don't be rude, Hayden. He didn't bring both of us on here to get in little bickerments and arguments and things like that. We have to work together as a team. You and I don't get to draft or, be involved in drafts. Let's put it that way too often. So I need us to be on the same team here.
So to be fair, when I started that introduction and mentioned the analytics, that was going to be a mutual one, but then yeah.
What do I do? Yeah, what am I good for? What do I do on this?
Once we started week 17 correlation.
Thumbnails. Okay. Hey,
you've been working on your Photoshop skills to stay employed.
The thumbnails have been gassed, so that was actually
you're welcome.
Very much a compliment.
No, it's very fair because when you make your name in this industry from doing drafts and just projecting the talent and digging through all those hours and hours of research to be able to see who goes where, and now they're on those teams. Literally, all that matters in these drafts is what team they're on, not their ability, but who they play in week 17. So, What value do you see yourself providing over the next few years in this industry?
Yeah, I'm really excited just to only pick a team of players from 5 teams across the league, of 32. Really excited to do that. 6 teams, sorry.
Honest question now, because obviously you hear this a bunch. Do you believe that the way that week 17 has played into the strategy and the macro, do you think that may, have influence on what next year's drafts look like, the tournament structure, whether it's that heavy in the week 17, whether it's a bit more, just how do you think that's going to impact next year? Or how do you want to take this one?
Well, I think that we're starting to reach the consensus where week 17 is more or less like a tiebreaker, and that everyone's kind of saying it's player takes. If it's within the same tier, you want to have a tiebreaker towards the week 17, then sure. We'll see if this the tournament structure stays the way that it is, where week 17 is so important. There's obviously ways to tinker with that as well, but I think that we reached the consensus where everyone kind of understands the bit, or they're choosing not to understand it, and then everyone's going to go back to their player takes. What I've learned from the best ball stuff the last 2 years is we're getting into really deep into the weeds about roster construction and all these things. That can't last forever. Eventually it's just going to be more or less about player takes, kind of how DFS is now. So we're going to get through the hard parts of the nerds, and then eventually it's going to be back to the player takes, but it's all fun.
Justin, to answer your question, I would love for there to be a bit more emphasis on uniqueness of builds,
Mm-hmm.
And I think some more, let's say, rewarding for regular season would kind of emphasize that a little bit more as we go along the next few years. But I think that's the great thing about Underdog is, it's only been around for 2 years and we change things every single year. You're going to see, spoiler alert, some cool tournaments this summer too, so it's not like we're kind of do the same thing year over year, no matter what edges or anything else that people think they pick up year over year. So I'm not only excited for obviously Best Ball Mania 3, the puppies the rest of the summer, but also what we have in store for 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think you mentioned the regular season payouts aspect. I think that $1 million to the overall winners a really cool feature. But I'd love to see next year, hey, maybe it's actually $100K to the top 10. Because I think when you have a little more of okay, if it's the top 10 teams, now there's actually a bit more motivation for me to maybe I'm going to structure a little more to try to gear for this top 10 regular season, with that top 1 just being such a hard, difficult outlier. But yeah, I mean, then Underdog's been the king of being innovative around these things. So excited to see what we have. But for now, let's focus on this year. So I'm going to be pulling up. Let me share my screen. Let me get the drafts going. Anyone who is in chat, get ready if you would like to join, because as we always do after the draft, we will be taking a couple minutes, walking through, kind of giving our review of someone who's in chat, their team. So come join us in the BBM3. And we'll get going.
3 people. Justin, I am so used to hosting these that I don't really get to focus too much on the player pool. You know how it is, like when you're in that chair versus being in this chair. Chris G, Liam, Todd, Blaine, Bullock, all of you, I'm about to take this way too seriously. Just forewarning for everyone checking this out afterwards, I'm about to take this way too seriously. Heads up. Heads up.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we see definitely some familiar names in there. We've got the 4 spot. Always a bit of an interesting one.
I've been stuck at the 1, 9, 110, 111, 112 in every single draft this year. So I love this.
Okay. Well, 4 is going to be fun. I got a feeling we're going to start with a wide receiver. We have the ETR rankings as the mostly default with a couple of my tinkerings, especially at the top. But let's run through. So I know we saw a couple in the chat. I think here's a good question. So will Josh and Hayden have equity in the prize money for this draft? They will not. Look at that. Hands are up. They will not be drafting. They will be just providing some hypothetical ideas on what maybe if they were hypothetically drafting. Their only equity will be that if this team or any of the teams that we draft on stream, they will be invited to the massive party to celebrate if we win $1 million. So no actual equity, but definitely some life equity.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Prosecco will be popping at that party.
Okay. So starting off with the draft, we have the JT.
Do you think there's a cliff at 5?
More or less, yes. I think that Eckler, Henry, Cook, to me, all have like chances of being like top end dudes, but the odds of that are definitely lower.
Yeah. Those top 4 to me, or top 5 feel really good. So
yeah, and I mean, I'm assuming you're saying 3 wide receiver. Well, that makes our draft a lot more fun.
CMC?
I think we have to.
The turn obviously at 304 and 209 or whatever it is, you can get some really good running backs there. So at least when I'm at the 101, I love going wide receiver there and then 2 running backs on the turn. But Hayden, what do you think here?
I like McCaffrey.
Yeah, let's go CMC.
And then not drafting Fournette like every other team does in round 2 would be a great start.
Yep.
Why do you think so many are drafting Fournette in that second round? I refuse to say it. But I mean, it's one of those where like, yeah, there's a little positive correlation here, but the whole thing is the draft doesn't end at the round 2. You can pick up correlation later on, like we don't have to play this game where we automatically draft for correlation the first 5 rounds. Like
we can go Brady and Russell Gage later.
And then sprinkle on a little correlation at the end.
But I do think it's actually a good point where, okay, so we know that there is week 17 correlation between those 2 players, but there's also now losing a bit of a uniqueness or a leverage aspect because so many CMC teams are going to have Leonard Fournette.
Just writing down, the week 17 matchups, guys. That's it.
Well, I mean, we know that there's a trivia contest out there. There are some flashcards out there. If you have not memorized your week 17 matchups, then give me 10 push-ups because
come on, Josh, you can do it.
No, I mean it's up on this screen and it's down on my.
You probably have most of them down already.
No, I don't. No. School was not my thing. That's
you
why
didn't
I'm
read my column. I wrote
on
an entire column on this.
No. Again, it's on the other screen. This is why in math class I always knew I was going to have calculators later on. You have information that you can pull up later. School was never here. Again, this is why I have a YouTube channel.
Oh. Well, where's the bit equity? That's if you can't just recite them backwards, up and upside down.
Question, Hayden.
Yes.
You and I have our running back show on Thursday. Of these running backs towards the end of round 1, the Najee Harrises, the DeAndre Swifts, the Derrick Henrys, a well-known type of player, Dalvin Cook, so on and so forth. Have any of those caught your eye when preparing for the show on Thursday?
DeAndre Swift is super boom bust to me. Like I can see the path to him being a top 5 back. The offense would be better. He has that kind of profile. The problem with DeAndre Swift, he was really bad last year, and he was the way that he was accruing points. I'm not sure if that's going to play out this year, just because the way the Lions offense set up. He just needs to get better. Like he was really bad. He was not even the goal line back for a lot of those touches, and there's more obviously competition. So he needs to score more touchdowns. That means he has to be the 3rd down back. So I think there's a little bit of downside risk with DeAndre Swift at this price. And then to me, Najee Harris was like such a unique player. Like, yes, he's not as explosive as Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor for sure. But man, they would split him out wide.
Yep.
And he would catch passes out of the slot, like diving catches. He can play all three downs. I think he's pretty interesting. There's like basically no way to me that Najee Harris is a bad pick. Like, he might not win you the league at the round 1-2 turn right now.
He
but
might
like,
not have the 60-yard plays like DeAndre Swift and all that type of stuff. But
how is he going to fail though? How is he going to fail?
Volume is ridiculous.
He played like 900 snaps.
Yeah, the volume. Okay, let's get prepared. Alvin Kamara, no. Saquon. I mean, Saquon has a legit chance to be a top 6 running back in this year, like at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think and I know a lot of talk is that, hey, if we knew that Saquon was going to provide us a full season of health, knowing what we have with the new offense and new offensive line, I think we're safe with the
My only concern with this is I also love Nick Chubb on the return, but I'm cool with Saquon here. Hayden.
Saquon.
Okay, let's do Saquon.
Okay, and yeah, so I'm in full agreement there. I do love Alvin Kamara, and so I'm. It's tough to try to, I don't know, mark my exposure between those two. Because I do think Kamara is the same situation where, hey, even if he does have a 2-game suspension, he still has the opportunity to actually play. I mean, James Winston actually looked pretty decent when he was healthy at the beginning of that year. And when we can actually use Kamara in his old role, and we know that there's the uncertainty around the Michael Thomas situation, like, I love him, but I'm all on board the Saquon train as well with that new offense and, improved offensive line.
We have a whole clip on our channel about Saquon. I mean, it was so many fluke injuries. He looked great before that first one. Then that second one, obviously, when you have 2 tennis balls on either side of your ankle, you're not going to look great towards the end of the year. And Brian Daboll has morphed his offenses from Alabama to Buffalo to surround whatever the great talent is on that team. And as much as I love Kadarius Toney, Saquon is unquestionably the best talent on that offense. And he's never had, Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal, 2 great stars along the tackle spots, along with some interior pieces too. So this is like maybe the best situation he's had. And he probably won't have to rely on just those 25, 45 yarders that he reels off to.
And gentlemen, we have a ridiculous situation right now. We are
I think we need to, just because it's so unique.
Hayden, take it.
Well, I'm not sure if we want Fournette or Kamara. Both would be unique. They don't really get all 3 of these running backs don't get paired up too frequently. I'm proud of either.
I think we got to go Fournette.
Okay, that works.
I think now, because again, we have that correlation. I still want to play for the correlation. The reason why we weren't doing it before is because to get unique, but now we are already quite unique with that Saquon and those two.
I think personally, I have Nick Chubb ahead of Leonard Fournette, but for what you're just saying, in terms of so many people taking Fournette in our spot in the second round, and we get him in the third round, and this is so on brand for us, Hayden. We were the running back ambassadors last summer when everyone was just
and I'm
taking
back
wide
to
receiver, and then running back to start here, and then we just build everything else, and let's boogie.
So you're talking to Mr. Back-to-back running back was my go-to to start those drafts last year.
Why didn't people listen to you, Justin?
We just didn't have the summer of best ball streams. People were high on wide receivers.
Justin, just the way that ADPs have shifted, basically all the running backs are down about a round and a half at some points in the draft. The wide receivers, especially in the top 5-6 rounds, are up about a round on average. To me, it's making throughout most of the draft, the running backs seem like the best picks to me. So I'm getting into these spots where even if I go running back, I'll wait. And then I'll get like Eli Mitchell after ADP. And I'm like, wow, like Eli Mitchell projects to me much better. So I'm getting these like kind of weird, robust RB teams. And what's happened to me, and the data was bad last year, about 4 running backs or going 5 running backs, but the last 2 running backs were really late. I'm getting really running back heavy in the top half of the draft, and it's making me a little nervous because everyone says it's so bad. But to me, the values are getting out of control just because running backs are dropping so much.
At the same time, why don't we just win the freaking regular season with 3 ridiculous running backs and roll from there?
I mean, it's pretty impressive. And I think a lot of it has to do with the macro aspects where they're just the right wide receivers in this kind of like round 3, round 4 range just don't feel so. The ones that are getting drafted in those 4 picks, 6 picks in between us previously, those just feel like such stretches for the end of the second, top of the third. And so that's where I'm forced to hey, I want to grab the running back. Those running backs, we're getting running backs in the top of the third, end of the second. That legit could be the RB1 of the season. Likely, no, but if Saquon ended up RB1 in the season, if Leonard Fournette did, where if he still has the same role he did last year, like that wouldn't be shocking to me.
Question at
Yes.
the 2 spot. I mean, this is forcing it early. No, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Justin Herbert.
Yeah. I mean,
Thanks, I hate it.
I'm just asking questions. That's all I do.
Yeah. I mean,
My
so
job.
why not go Keenan Allen there? Because if you really want to go for this, like you could probably have gotten Justin Herbert in this 4th round here, and you could have gone, Keenan Allen still available. And then you would have really had your Charger stack. I think it's a stretch because other people are going to be able to get very similar there, but more value.
Yeah. I'm with
Or if you didn't want to go that hard on the Chargers, you would have taken someone else. But I still think like you can get Justin Herbert. Let's see, what's his ADP?
Just quick point based on the conversation, and not to shout anyone out. I'm just really, I think it's so cool to see these unique drafts. So I know he's in the chat. So I think it's a interesting build that you're doing. Your point on Hayden, there are points in this draft that like I love taking running backs. Like I love where Khalil Herbert's going. I love where Ramondre Stevenson's going. I love a few pieces. And then now that we're doing this, we have to completely and totally resist that and just hammer certain spots. Okay. So here we are. And we're kind of in those spots. And I'm glad we don't have to take any of these 4 running backs. Juju's up there. DK's up there. We could go Mahomes and stack him a little bit later on with MVS. Hayden, any thoughts here?
I'm open to Juju, Patrick Mahomes. I think we should probably go Juju if that's where you rank it. Waller's fallen past ADP. I'm fine with that as well.
Waller would definitely be my pick here.
Yeah, I agree.
Juju, you could, 57. We have 52 at the next. Like if you want Juju, you can get him at the next one without reaching this much. Waller feels like a good fit for this build where we're going to have elite running backs. Now we've got an elite tight end. We know we're going to have to go heavy on depth at wide receiver anyways.
Cool.
And
there's no difference between Juju and maybe the rest at that spot.
If we wanted to go Juju, maybe like there could have been a go Mahomes there
Mahomes first,
and then grab Juju on the comeback.
Yeah.
The other thing about the Waller is just the way that like the ADP pockets play, he's being paired up with Debo and Devontae Adams a ton on the other side of the board. We can kind of get a little mini stack of that game, possibly a certain 49ers quarterback and a little bit with like maybe Brandon and Ayuk, and all of a sudden you have like a little bit of that game without having like the constant like Debo Samuel with Darren Waller. We're getting a little more unique in our build here.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing that I've been thinking about the past couple weeks is, so the last couple years, ADP has been the most predictive it has ever been. And that's just a testament to the people who are, producing content, the people who are drafting, everyone's getting smarter. Okay. This year, I think that's going to change because I think this year, the double correlation of people reaching to grab their week 17, same team and opponents,
Broncos,
as much correlation is drawing the ADPs of players that like, if Gabriel Davis is a good example I use, because if Gabriel Davis should be a mid-5th round based off projections for him, actually, but because you have people who are drafting the 3 early Bengals of Chase, Mixon, Higgins, and the people who are drafting Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen are fighting for him, he keeps getting drawn up. And now we're actually going to be less accurate in our ADP of actual projections because of these macro. Okay, we are up again.
Metcalf would be my pick. And for the exact same reason, he doesn't have a quarterback to stack with. He's also playing the Jets, and none of the Jets go before DK Metcalf. So since we started talking about week 17, his price tag continues to drop. There's nothing about the Seahawks offense that has changed at all. And to me, he's like the perfect anti-example where there is no stacking with DK Metcalf. So the projections to me, like the market's not going to be pricing into what DK Metcalf can do as a standalone talent here.
Okay. I think that makes complete sense. I have drafted DK.
Can we do some player takes with DK real quick?
Let's do it.
Because it was interesting, and Hayden, we did this on our last show, looking at the passing chart for Russell Wilson, and how it truly was like the seas parted and everything was just on the outside. Then in like the 1 or 2 or whatever games, a little more than that Geno came in, the passing chart was almost normal. Like the middle of the field was absolutely targeted. I think it's fair to ask, and we aren't having to draft, DK and Tyler Lockett if in a alternate universe, Russell Wilson was still their quarterback, right? Those guys would be going much earlier. But that moonshot that we keep talking about with Russell Wilson, I don't know if there is a quarterback sorry, Drew Lock out there, who does that as well still as Russell Wilson does it. So like those big plays that we see from those types might happen a little less frequently, but we are still getting a really good outcome and a range of outcomes with this DK Metcalf selection, again, on where he's going. So
the chat is letting me know that Russell Wilson has left the Seahawks. I meant that nothing has changed about the Seahawks over the last month since DK Metcalf's price has dropped. Like, it was priced in that Russell Wilson was no longer his quarterback. Like right now, the only thing that are changing is the Broncos wide receivers have flown past him, and he continues to drop because that Week 17 game isn't as sexy.
Justin, your point on players moving up, and you mentioned Gabriel Davis. I mean, the Broncos are the number one example of this. I mean, Tim Patrick's up 13 picks. Cortland Sutton's up 8 picks. Jerry Jeudy's up 7 picks. You know, we're talking about the wide receiver 18 in Cortland Sutton, the wide receiver 20 in Jerry Jeudy, and then Tim Patrick. Meanwhile, Russell Wilson's ADP is like dropping just a couple of spots, you know? So that's just those two wide receivers. I know one is going to do well. I'd probably put my money in Cortland Sutton's corner, but that is so rich at the moment. That is so rich for the style of ball that Russell's playing.
It's interesting because we have in years past, and even in DFS, like we see, ambiguity leads to people kind of getting scared away from it. And like I think the Godwin Evans is a great example from DFS, where people weren't playing them in DFS because you weren't sure which of the two was going to go off with Brady. Here with Denver, I would have expected that kind of hey, we don't know who's actually going to be Russ's favorite target would lead to people not drafting him. But instead, everyone's going for that upside, and all of them are getting steamed. And I think like Patrick and Hamler, we have the injury risk is looking a little worse and worse, but like they have the largest upside if they play into a better role. Right now, Jeudy and Sutton, like they really can't outperform their ADP by that much, maybe a round. And so there's, in my mind, it's too much of hey, they could also be really bad and just not be in good favor with Russ versus that upside of maybe you actually get a steal of a round.
Herzig, my favorite way to play this is like those, like the top 3 games, the Bengals game, this Broncos game, the Chargers game, to do mini stacks in those games. And instead of doing a full blown game stack, then go pivot to like a Raven stack or a Cardinal stack, like the second tier stacks, where if you go like Mike Williams and Cooper Kupp, but then don't go Stafford and Herbert and those guys, and then go pivot back to like the cheaper, like the second tier games, kind of my favorite way to play. So you're not paying the premium pick on every single one of those.
Can we go Elijah Moore here? I mean, I would have taken Drake London ahead of Elijah Moore. I've been doing that a lot lately, but I do like Elijah maybe as the top of this grouping. I would also listen to a conversation, Hayden, with Nuke Hopkins at this spot based on the tournament outcome.
Now, do you know who the Jets play though in Week 17, Josh?
Yes, they play the Seattle Seahawks.
Yes, sir.
The decision makes itself.
It does. I would have advocated though for Drake London ahead of Elijah Moore just for like outright point totals. And I understand that week 17 is week 17, but Hayden, we're doing a bunch of these employee drafts. I am ending up with so much Drake London based on where he's going in this range with the Treylon Burkses and Elijah Moores of the world.
So you mentioned Marcus Mariota at the top of the show with the Drake London. I know there's historically like some data that shows that hey, an alpha wide receiver on a bad offense just doesn't have that level of upside that we're looking for. Does that scare you? What are your kind of thoughts there? Is this more of a bet on the offense, or is this more of a bet on Drake?
Mostly Drake London and how they can be utilized in unison with Kyle Pitts. Like they can just put one at X, one in the slot, and then vice versa. Obviously, red zone success. Hayden has heard me say this 100 times. Arthur Smith was fantastic at it. Their offensive line in Atlanta is probably not better than it was last year, but it was like literally the league worst last season. Actually, just going back and watching Marcus in full games, we are, and maybe you disagree, kind of underrating how ludicrous he is of an athlete, just in terms of rushing the football. Like they were long, massive gains. And if there's one player that we talk about who can have that Konami code late, it's probably Marcus, but we don't know, obviously, if he's playing 17 games. So there's always that conversation too.
And if he doesn't play 17 games, you're obviously getting Desmond Ridder. What do we think there? Like, because I guess there's two scenarios.
The NFL didn't like him. Why should we like him?
Yeah, I was going to say there's two scenarios for Ridder playing. There's either Mariota played really poorly, and now your team's probably not in good shape anyways because he wasn't able to create an efficient offense, or Ridder's done some amazing stuff in practice and earned that job. I think it's probably more the former than the latter, but not.
Can you go the quarterback tab?
Yes. So it's Dak. It is Russ and Trey. No stack opportunities with those at the top of it.
Gotta wait.
You mentioned Hopkins. I love Hopkins in builds where I'm going to go very deep on wide receivers because
you can fill in the first 6 weeks.
Yeah, and because we don't have that elite.
And he might be our elite option in week 17. That we're just getting at a huge discount.
Exactly. If I go heavy on wide receivers early, I'm not drafting Hopkins because in that situation, I've already invested a lot at the wide receiver spot. What are you laughing at?
No, I love this team.
Well, what's your thoughts on DeAndre with Marquise Brown? To me, Marquise Brown, if you're just doing like projections, it seems a little aggressive where he's going at the moment. So I don't really like buying that price tag and then having DeAndre Hopkins a little bit later. I guess that can be sold with Kyler Murray. But to me, I like my favorite way to stack the Cardinals right now would be Kyler Murray, DeAndre with Zach Ertz. I like filling the tight end spot with these stacks whenever possible because those wide receivers are competing for the same wide receiver roster spots. The tight end could sneak in there with a 15-point game. Those wide receivers typically need like 18, 20 fantasy points to crack the roster. What are your thoughts on the Cardinals? Because I'm very, very in on stacking them because they play in Atlanta and that offense could be pretty sick.
Yeah, in general, I completely agree. I think Marquise Brown is too rich for my blood because he's getting drafted more based off his regular season than what's going to be happening in the playoffs. And so that's where I don't want to commit that amount of capital for a player that's going to produce what I'm expecting at that level in the playoffs with Hopkins healthy. Hopkins playing, I guess he's healthy. So I agree with you there. I love the Hopkins. I love the Ertz stack. I also think Rondale Moore, gosh, I was talking, there's no Josh, we were the ones talking about how there's no player comp for him that's had success in the league for a sustained time. But
he'd have to play a totally different sport this year. He'd have to be a totally different player than he was last season. And he might be it's just one of those cases, Justin, where I'm perfectly comfortable saying I have to see it to believe it first. He is thick Tavon at this moment, a 1.1 ADOT last season. That's 2.5 yards, 3 yards shorter than anyone else across the league. He just has to play a different sport. And I think in their ideal version, Marquise Brown fills in as maybe a supercharged Christian Kirk. And then they have DeAndre Hopkins on the outside as a vertical slot player in terms of Marquise Brown. And so where does that leave us with Rondale,
Yeah. And
maybe in the first 6 weeks, it's a different outcome, but who they really want to be, I don't think they want to feature Rondale.
That's, I think, the bull case. I think the bull case is that they give him a role in those first 6 weeks that if he's able to play, a different position than he played before and actually thrive at it, that he earns that opportunity going forward. I think it's unlikely, but I think that's his chance. All right, we're coming on back. You mentioned quarterback last time.
Kadarius went, MVS went, Russell Gage went, obviously.
It seems like Trey Lance's ADP is legitimately climbing.
Also, we just had MVS way ahead of Sky Moore, which congratulations, everyone. We're finally here.
So are you in favor of that take or?
Oh, yeah. I love Sky Moore as a player. It's just, and Hayden outlined this in this way. It's amazing that the wide receiver 13 in his own NFL draft is being selected as what? The wide receiver 48.
Yeah, my rookie wide receiver take is that the market on rookie wide receivers has gone up in general with the NFL. So if we're using historical models and plugging in those same inputs, we're going to be over projecting these rookies. And Sky Moore would be the perfect example. The wide receiver 13 in the draft classes typically are the 100th overall pick, and we never hear from them again. So,
yep, no, that's completely fair. I do believe that Sky Moore probably just from the role he would play in that offense has a higher upside and make a more valuable playoff scenario for us. I don't think MVS is going to magically. Oh, sorry. Are we good with Tyler Lockett? Continue that game stack, get the Seattle.
Yep. I also think there's correlation just if they, right now, if the Seahawks trade for Baker Mayfield, even Jimmy G, there's correlation. It doesn't even have to be about week 17, just team correlation based off of something that can happen the rest of the offseason.
100%. Let me rewind a little bit on the MVS point, because it's not just where obviously Sky Moore went in the draft. I actually think MVS is perennially underrated and undervalued, especially when we consider best ball versus regular season long. In fact, when you look at where Patrick Mahomes, even last season, was his lowest attempts of 20 plus yards in terms of his percentage of passing plays, he still was 7th in the league at that. And so this is the player in MVS who by far and away is the best vertical shot, big play threat on that team. And, he's making the 7th most money on the Chiefs this season. And so MVS, where he was going and probably still going, I'm all the way in comparison to, we don't even know where Sky Moore is playing early on, but as we have seen, there's the post by rookie bump, as Hayden has outlined greatly in previous years too.
So I like that take because you are seeing an upside case for him in the same type of role we've seen him previously, just in that flank and that speed and that high A dot role. I don't like the take where people are like, he's going to take, you get the preseason reports, he's going to play a new role, he's running all the routes. Like, he did that in Green Bay and he didn't then play that in the games. Like, that was a practice thing. It just doesn't happen. I don't expect him to transform, but I agree with you in that Mahomes offense, playing a bit more of those Tyreek deep balls, trying to beat that cover too. Like, that's where if he succeeds, if he excels, that's how. I agree.
What's a plan at quarterback?
Derek Carr. Get the stack for Darren Waller. Major tier drop off of after Derek Carr based off who's going. So I can grab him.
Yeah, and this is probably going to be a 3-quarterback build too. I think Derek Carr is probably destined for 30 touchdowns this year when, in fact, he's hit like 23 and 25 and 27 the last few years. Like, this is his best chance of doing it. They've been awful in red zone touchdown success, like 22nd and 27th and 29th over the last 3 years. And now he has like 3 legitimately of the best receiving red zone weapons. And Josh McDaniels has been great in the red zone in the last couple.
There's nothing more fun than just on a Friday afternoon pouring yourself a beer and watching Hunter Renfrow inside the 5-yard line.
Devontae too, man. And Darren Waller, when his couple years ago when he broke out, they were using him in the slot. They were using him out wide as an ISO situation, back of the end zone stuff. Like, that trio in that condensed field is scary good.
Yeah, completely agree. It's going to be fun. And we know they're going to have to be throwing because they have some fantastic offenses in their division. They're going to have some shootouts, some difficult games. I'm bullish on that offense as a whole. Also, you mentioned 3 QB build. Completely agree. And to be honest, if we don't get sniped on it, I think Baker's our 3rd QB. We've got the Carolina situation with the Christian McCaffrey, potentially set up that one for the week, for the correlation in that week 7 game stack. Possibly the Seattle situation. So you kind of have 2 outs there to get really great correlation, or maybe he just plays somewhere else and you still get like some Baker value.
Yep, and 15% of the drafts in BBM3, Baker Mayfield's gone undrafted. So even, hopefully, we want to trade for, or we want to draft Baker Mayfield, then hope Baker Mayfield doesn't show up until like later, and then he'll probably be mostly undrafted.
That's a sharp hit, yeah, because he is like, I'm not a huge fan of trying to find unique players that aren't being drafted and throwing them on my team now, because just as you said, as more reports come out, like, if they're going to have an increased chance of doing well in the season, well, then I'll probably start getting tips on it in the offseason and preseason, and then they'll start getting drafted. I want to draft those unique players the last couple of weeks of the season when we know that they're going to be unique players. We're drafting Baker here because of what he's setting up and how he fits with our team.
The other thing about the unique players at the end of the drafts is I think people underestimate how often or overestimate how often a player like with 192nd overall ADP gets drafted. Like, those players are still being drafted only like 50% of the time. Like, you don't have to go into 215.9 ADP land to find unique players. Like 206 ADP, that guy's being drafted only about 10% of the time anyways.
Unless his name is Chris Evans, Hayden, then we have to draft him every time.
Yeah, we can draft him. I'm fine with that.
It's funny because of all the Chris Evans chatter that pretty much you've been driving, I'm now drafting more Samaje Perine.
You're welcome, Justin. Hopefully it works out for you. It's going to work out for one of us,
But the people who are drafting Chris Evans, it may not work out for now because so many people are drafting Chris Evans.
Well, look, this is how I spend my Friday evenings, is looking at weeks round 17 and 18 and being like, who's this year's Kadarius Toney and AJ Green, and who can I volume
Julio
all the
Jones
way up
is this year's AJ Green
and thrust 100%. All the way to round 13 and 14 like it was last year.
All right, let's tease on this. Julio Jones is this year's AJ Green. What do we mean by that? Because AJ Green actually had a decent season, like at the second half of last
Julio
year.
might. Okay.
Yeah.
Board.
We still need some. Oh gosh, you're just making it too easy
ADP,
on us.
Yeah, after ADP, you have to.
Well, with the stack, with
sure.
What we're getting going on there, that's great value for Garrett Wilson. We're pick 117, ADP 103.
So we have both pairings of wide receivers.
Okay, my theory here is that nobody wants to stack this damn game, which trust me, I get it. But because we hogged up the rest of those options, like Garrett Wilson might have been available in even another round after because we keep hogging those things. It's interesting, like going back to like the NFL playoffs best ball. When you get in a room where everyone's focused on their stacks, you get some crazy ADP values because nobody's going to be sniping you on those players. We're starting to get to that point a little bit. Like I'm probably over exaggerating a little bit, but since more players are being stacked for the correlation on week 17, even on the bring back, I think that type of thing happens a little bit more often now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, we are
any like. It's like
we're way too early for the next quarterback based on ADPs and where players are going.
Is like Fields or Lawrence. I feel like when I have Derek Carr, I feel like I want to take one more chance at like a high upside guy. Like Daniel Jones makes sense with like Galladay if he's available.
To your point though, Hayden, that's 20 spots above ADP. We'd have to take him at right now.
Yeah, no, I'm just like looking for like back. Like should I focus on Kenny Galladay now so I can set up Daniel Jones type of thing?
Right.
What do we think about Rashad Penny here as our fourth and final running back? Gets to Seattle. We're making a bet on the Seattle offense with this team.
Haven't we done it enough? Haven't we done it enough? That's 5 players we're about to get from that team. Can we get Kenny Galladay?
You want to do Kenny?
I would pick Galladay.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Don't you think 5 is like way too much?
5 from one game, or
right? Especially if we're trying to then angle to get the quarterback as well.
The prices are easy though, are pretty cheap though.
Yep,
so I think that kind of matters.
And also, like, it's a major bet on Seattle being a good team this year, and that's where you're right. Week 17, we're probably not going to have Penny and DK and Lockett all have huge games and are maybe a quarterback or whatever. Like, that's unlikely. But if they have a great 3-week spout in the playoffs, that may take some puzzle pieces to say, hey, maybe it was Penny this game, but then you had the DK Lockett stack the next. But the other thing is drafting a 4th running back at this point when we still need wide receivers is a little too much for me. And
there's plenty of other running backs I would have liked to fill that 4th spot other than Rashad Penny when he's like such a question for how that backfield is going to unfold too.
Yeah. And hey, we got Saquon, we got Kenny Galladay. I think for our next QB, Daniel Jones with the Barkley and Galladay looks nice. Zach Wilson with the double jet stack looks nice.
Can we not go naked Trevor and get Evan Ingram on the end or something like that?
That's possible.
I'm fine with that too. You can get some of his wide receivers.
I love
like
Trevor.
To me, I like to work backwards, like with that Kenny Galladay pick. Just because I know I want Daniel Jones, like some Daniel Jones exposure this year. And even if I'm not sold on Kenny Galladay, right now we're in a spot where like I'm looking at like where is some upside at the quarterback position. And to me, Daniel Jones is one of the few options that actually have like top 10, top 12 upside. So just might as well take Galladay now just to at least give you that opportunity to draft
the Galladay stuff, Justin, we just did a show on this on our channel, Underdog Fantasy. Go and check it out. Last season, he only had like 14% of his targets were 20 plus yards down the field. Like when he was great with the Lions, it was up there with 33% deep, 33% intermediate, and 33% short. Like they just didn't throw down the field last season. And we know that's like his best avenue, right? Are those slightly in breakers or outside the numbers and winning contested catches, creating that sliver of separation. And you 100% know that Brian Daboll understood that with Gabe Davis and set him up for those positions and understands that like, hey, we need that vertical playmaker. And I think that's going to be Galladay in this offense.
And offensive line improved, you actually have more time to get those downfield passes. I think that was the big problem last year is that Daniel Jones was always basically having his back to the offensive line, having to run to the side and like or just doing the quick passes. It was, I don't want to call it like a Pittsburgh wasted year last year with New York, but it was pretty close. It's going to be night and day difference from this year. Okay. For the QBs, for me, okay, so Lawrence is gone. I'm kind of happy about that because I didn't really want to take a new QB there. We are reaching, if we wanted to grab QB in this spot, maybe with the 148, we could start considering maybe like a Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here? What do you feel good about?
If there's a running back that we like, I mean, does Michael Carter make some sense here? Or is that too much, you think? Naeem Hines is fine with me.
What about Gesicki or Irv? I mean,
I take Irv over Gesicki.
Okay. I like the Minnesota. So, I mean, Miami playing New England in New England week 17 really scares me. I am bullish on Irv. So week 7 bye, so we don't have to worry about that. Minnesota plays Green Bay week 17. Good defense, but okay, we'll go with Irv.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
But again, the good defense thing, like for a tight end hitting or like at least creating an edge among top 2, top 3, that's so much more achievable at that spot. You know, he just has to fall into 2 touchdowns, which is a big deal, you know, but that's different than it is for, you know, a wide receiver trying to get into the top 5 of his position or running back getting into the top 5 of his position. So
agreed. I'm definitely biased. That week 7, like at New England in week 17, that just does not feel like a offense I want to, you know, I want action on, which stinks because otherwise I think across the season I'm pretty bullish on the Dolphins as a whole. But
I actually feel the same way about the Vikings offense going into Green Bay for week 17 is terrifying to me as well. But I want to be high on the Vikings offense for like pace, neutral pass rate, all those things probably going to go up this year.
Hayden, we do a show every year on making the case for players no one wants to make the case for. And I feel like that's Mike Gesicki this year because I have no clue how he's going to be utilized, you know, because it's with Jalen.
Do you want to make the case for
Perry.
him?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Don't.
I don't want to, but someone's going to have to. I was wrong on his outcome last year because because obviously Will Fuller missed time. They had to use Jalen Waddle as an outside wide receiver because Devontae Parker also missed time, so on and so forth. Anyways.
All right, we are back up. We are at pick 148. It's a bit of a stretch on Daniel Jones,
I like this though.
I think we need that kind of QB upside that he provides. Plus, we've got the Saquon and Kenny Golladay stack going.
I'm cool with this.
He feels like a good fit.
Yep.
And so now, so I think tight end, we're at Darren and Irv. Feel good about that. No need to get a third, right?
Yeah, I think we're good there.
Cool. We know we're definitely going to go for another QB here. Maybe that Zach Wilson. If Zach Wilson doesn't, fit, maybe we end up with the Baker aspect.
If we pick Robbie, then we've basically taken the 2 spots that Baker's going to go to with Panthers or Seattle.
Yep, definitely fair. Yeah, cool. So it is interesting. Like, I don't know if Zach Wilson is available. I kind of lean to Zach Wilson just because we've got 2 pass catchers. Like, this offense has to be good. And Zach Wilson's upside, even if you knew Baker was playing the full season, like, is still higher there. And so a team that needs a third quarterback to actually produce for you, I probably want to lean Zach.
Point here, and this isn't coming from a beat writer. It's just, a fan who follows his team and has a podcast on it. I went in the Badlands podcast, which Connor Rogers and Joe Caparoso do a great job. Like, they are very in the weeds when it comes to Jet stuff. They believe, and the Jets were 32nd in rush attempts last year. They think that the Jets want to be top 5 in rush attempts this season. Like, really lean into Kyle Shanahan. We're going to run the football down your throat. Now, you have to obviously be winning to hit that mark, and that's a lot of that factor. But that really stood out to me. Obviously, going from 32nd to top 5 would be a significant difference in how they played the ball last year. So,
I wonder how much that is just looking at the situation that they drafted Breece Hall so early, that a team wants to run more because that's usually, as you said, is an indicator of being success, correlation, not causality, or if there's something more to it. Either way, if they're rushing that much, we're probably seeing a lot more touchdowns too.
Yeah.
But
and
also,
DK Metcalf's going to have 2 80-yard touchdowns in the first quarter on this team. It's not going to matter.
But also, if the Jets lead in rushing, if they actually don't have a great game, their wide receivers don't do well, this team's kind of dust anyways. And like, it is what it is because we drafted 2, Jets wide receivers. So that's why, I wouldn't use that in this draft to deter me from drafting Zach Wilson. I would use that in future drafts to maybe deter me from drafting more Jets wide receivers.
Yep.
All right. So as we come back, we can start taking a look. Let's just discuss. So we have McCaffrey, Saquon, Lenny.
Yeah, we need
all
one more.
healthy
Can
right
we look
now.
at the running back tab?
Yeah, what would happen? I was just ask, how would you feel if we left this draft with just these 3? How important is it?
I need to get one more. I think.
Okay.
The data says to draft more. I'm leaving the light on for this working still.
Okay. I think I agree with that. Like, if we ended up where a situation we only ended up those 3, I wouldn't hate it, but I kind of agree. Like, I'd like to find one more that feels like a good fit.
There's a lot of last rounders that still feel really good at running back, And
that's how we got Chris Evans.
This was Chris Evans, a long way to get back.
No,
to Chris
there's
Evans.
a couple more. I've been taking some rookies at that spot. Let's put it that way.
Okay. We will. I'm excited to get to that conversation going forward. We are coming up. That Robbie Anderson feels juicy.
Love
it.
Now, Justin, we get a bit close to this. You know, this is our little baby that we're making here. You've only done a couple of these, but you've obviously done tons of drafts already this summer. How does this team sit in relation to those in terms of uniqueness and how it's fallen for us after doing that 3 running back start? Because it's fallen pretty well to me.
It has fallen very well. I'd say this is one of the most high upside teams that I have drafted this summer. Now, high upside because we are investing in traditionally bad offenses, but getting great value on them. And so if the Jets are able to outperform our expectations, then this team could be very, very good. Also, this team is more likely just to suck because Seattle and the Jets aren't good.
And our quarterbacks, I'm nervous about the quarterbacks.
I'm really nervous about the quarterbacks too.
I hate having bad quarterbacks, but to be fair, Derek Carr could easily beat out this
30
ADP
touchdowns
by like a good margin. Now, he's not going to be Josh Allen, but I think he still has like quarterback 6 upside, you know, maybe not quarterback 2, but you can probably get up to like the quarterback 6, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think our QBs could not lose us this, and that's what we're really hoping for when we are going to win with our running backs. We're going to win with our tight end, and we're going to, if it works out for our wide receivers, be pretty strong.
Okay, so we're looking at here. Julio, Zach Wilson would be my top options. I think that if we're going Zach Wilson, we can totally do it right now.
Yeah, I think Zach Wilson is the play when we've got so much invested in this game. Like rather than
I'm cool not going Baker. I'm cool not going the Baker out of this.
Okay, I like it, and that leaves that round 18 rather than dealing with the Baker situation. You may be able to get that rookie running back that you've got your
not Chris Evans. Don't draft Chris Evans.
And that's how we got Samaje Perine.
One player that I like in this range is Jamal Williams. I like drafting running backs or like these like insurance handcuff types of behind the running backs that are actually supposed to be first, second round picks. Because if they're wrong, that means your team's extra right. If you're like drafting like other backups, but like their running backs going in like Zamir White, to me, like, all right, congrats, you beat the Josh Jacobs team. That team wasn't going to go anywhere anyways. Like to me, if you're right on Jamal Williams, that means that DeAndre Swift team's totally dust.
Justin, Chris Evans went in round 15.
No,
sorry. I'm just people. I don't do this. Well, most of the time to like change ADP. I do this because like I believe it, you know, and that sucks.
There you go. There's BFFL. So this is BFFL who's in the draft, taking a unique build, going heavy, strong QBs, and he loves Evans. He knew you can't wait too long in an underdog stream to grab Chris Evans. Okay. So I like what you were saying about and I mean, when we were talking about DeAndre Swift earlier in the draft, I think that Jamal Williams isn't a bad running back. He's still only 27. Like if we're a little more optimistic on that Detroit offense, which I know the ETR guys are, Left Hands puts them down and kind of the win totals there, Silva as well. If that offense is better than, what we've seen in the past, Jamal Williams actually could play a bit heavier of a role. And you talked about what happens inside the goal line with the lack of DeAndre Swift there. And that I don't think they want him to be that player. Even though we as fantasy players really want to see it just for the more volume. So Jamal Williams, I think, has standalone value as well, that he could eke into a larger role. And then if Swift went down, has decent upside.
Matt from the chat has the best point about this too. Totally agree. Jamal Williams is like the funniest dude ever. And when Hard Knocks comes rolling around, Jamal Williams ADP is going to climb. Jersey sales are going to climb. Everything. Everyone's going to fall in love with Jamal Williams. So get him in now before Hard Knocks starts.
That is some next
and
level
I mean it. That
value
is
hounding.
Absolute facts.
There's also some big splits when we talk about the halves of last season, because Dan Campbell and company took over the play calling, 10 games into the season?
Yeah,
11 games into the season?
Same time with all the injuries. It was a little combination going on, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just the usage and how everything looked on the field was so much more different. It was so much more clear with them they had like a legit identity. So again,
just get sniped.
Here we go. Okay. Julio?
I love Julio, man. At this
I mean,
cost,
me too.
I can't.
As soon as Julio signs, it'll be the ADP will climb from this spot.
His numbers last year and the year before were not that bad. Obviously, he didn't play at all, but when he was
wait, what about Wandale? We have Daniel Jones.
I gotta go Julio. I gotta go Julio.
We might be able to get Julio with the next one.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We can go both.
Okay. I'm gonna grab Wandale here just because that's value on Wandale. That's about like 15 picks after his ADP.
Yeah.
We have the Daniel Jones correlation. Julio does drop to a point that like we could still get him on the next one.
And I think Wandale, his upsides because Kadarius Toney's doing Kadarius Toney things, and we have Kenny Golladay. Like to me, I don't like the Wandale with Kadarius because those two are going to be battling for like the same types of targets. But Kenny Golladay and Wandale can have reasonable seasons at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So we do know that people are looking to snipe. There it is. The Julio snipe, the streamer snipe. I still think Wandale was the better play though for this draft, for this situation.
Yeah.
This feels like maybe a running. So our draft is going to be running back, wide receiver for the last 2 picks. We agree on that?
Yeah, unless there's crazy value at tight end, but even then. Yeah.
We can keep an eye on it. I agree, yeah. So knowing that, let's start off with running back.
White. Oh. Why? Why don't you like that, Hayden?
We
can. Post by rookie bump.
We have Derek Carr.
We have Derek Carr if we want to. I'm fine with it. I like Zamir White as a
I'm getting a whole bunch of Zamir White in round 18.
Okay. Do we see Zamir White? I mean, so we're going to go Zamir White. Do we see him playing more of that pass catching role? Do we see him playing?
That's going to be Brendan Bolden at worst, I think.
Like, okay, so
he's Josh Jacobs.
Right. He is Josh Jacobs. If something happens with Josh Jacobs, this is the goal line guy.
Okay. Can he outplay Josh Jacobs? Josh Jacobs, they did not pick up his option. Do we think like, hey, this is especially
small chance. It might be one of those where they know it's the end of the road for Josh Jacobs. If he gets a knock or misses a couple weeks, then Zamir White steps in, plays well, and they're like, hey, this is going to be our guy for the next 4 years. We're going to roll with him the rest of the year.
Okay.
And long season too. We don't need him early. You know,
Zamir White is athletic enough where if something happened to Kenyon Drake or something like that, I don't think that it's without question that he can't play third downs. Like I think there's a chance that he could if they ever asked him to.
Okay. One thing I'll note is usually with this type of build where I have 3 running backs very high up and we're only going 4, I maybe would have considered more like of a JD McKissick, where someone that I know can give me those kind of 8-10 points a game if there is a week or two of 1 or 2 where like, hey, a running back's missing. If I'm going for like 6 late running backs and I'm looking for one to break out, that's where I think of Zamir White, where it's like, hey, I need this player to actually produce for me an elite level. If Josh Jacobs goes down for 4 weeks, Zamir White may not even produce high enough that he actually counts for our team because of our really good running backs. So on this, when I'm looking for a 4th running back, I'm often just saying, hey, maybe Christian misses a game, misses 2 games. Maybe it's one of those bye weeks. Who can just give me those kind of consistent 10, 12 points for those weeks?
I like that. The other thing, though, is this team, because we have Derek Carr, if Josh Jacobs is hurt, they might not run the ball as much. So then you get like a higher upside case for Derek Carr, Darren Waller, while getting possibly some Zamir White too.
I like that injury correlation where, I know you talked about this a decent amount, but one player goes down. It's not just the backup who then plays more. Sometimes the entire offense changes. And I think Derrick Henry is a great example where, hey, if you're going to draft Hassan Haskins, maybe also draft those Tennessee pass catchers because you're making a bet that Henry's hurt. And now that team is going to shift its identity.
Yep. I see a name I like, Josh, on this wide receiver
There are a
list.
couple names I really like here. And then there's one going against what Herzig said of, I don't like taking players who are undrafted just a be different and unique. But there's one that maybe that name pops into your head when we get there. Hayden.
Let me throw 2 out real quick that have stack correlation. So Sterling Shepard and Braxton Berrios.
I don't think we can do Sterling because Wandale is taking Sterling's spot.
Okay. What about Braxton?
I think he plays at the expense of Elijah Moore if he gets on the field, and that makes me nervous.
Okay. What are you guys thinking?
I was going to say Isaiah McKenzie,
Nico Collins.
Nico Collins is a good pick, I think. Scroll down a little bit. I think Byron Pringle's a good, reasonable.
Or the opposite of this, Hayden, is, and I know he has no correlation here, but Tyquan Thornton is one of these last round players that all he needs is
Harris
a couple
Marshall.
of big.
What about a
plays.
Juwan Jennings? Ends up plays Las Vegas, so would give us a run back there for week 17. I think still has a chance to see that role. Okay, we have Nico, but we can talk about Juwan after.
Yeah, to me, this is a thing where Nico Collins to me is in a totally different tier than Juwan Jennings, but
Same.
That's where it's how do you come up with the tiebreakers? We're guessing on the week 17 what matters more, this tier versus that. I have no idea. My instinct is to go Nico Collins because I know he's going to be out there in 2 wide receiver sets, and Juwan Jennings is not, but I have no idea.
And this team, we need those peak weeks, and this might just be a kind of a piecemeal wide receiver team. So grabbing Nico, who is at least going to produce and on the field,
Okay. We're getting chirped in the chat. Can we bring up Josh's tweet? I could be wrong.
What was Josh's tweet?
It says Wandale is not taking the Sterling Shepard spot. Okay. So let's talk through this with how we draft.
Okay, sorry. I was looking for a tweet.
Sorry. Comment. So in this build where we got Wandale 10 spots after ADP, Wandale Robinson, despite some usage at Kentucky, is not going to be an outside wide receiver. Okay. He is going to be in that Isaiah McKenzie slot wide receiver role that obviously Cole Beasley has done very well in the past for the Giants. Sterling Shepard is coming off a significant injury, is 29 years of age. And
in December, by the way.
And if he does play with who in a perfect world, Kenny Golladay is not playing in the slot. He's an outside wide receiver. Kadarius Toney has dominated on the outside when allowed to play in that area, but can also shift inside too. They're your 2 wide receiver sets. And then your 3rd wide receiver, when it's out there, is almost certainly going to be one of Wandale and Sterling Shepard. So if we already drafted Wandale, why would we then pair that up with Sterling Shepard? Yeah. That is my thought process.
People, this is why we come here, for the actual football takes. It is actually possible to draft best ball drafts with real football knowledge, real football takes, not just week 17 correlation. Okay. We have a decent amount of people in chat.
Hayden's not sure.
But that week 17 correlation does hit extra hard.
I love this team, and I hate the quarterbacks. My only question here, if we can review it.
Yes.
Looking back on this, okay, coming out of the 104.
We can go back.
If you can go to the grid. Were we in a better spot to potentially take a quarterback instead of Darren Waller?
Why?
That would have had to have been Patrick Mahomes, because then we would have felt better about our quarterbacks, but not had an elite tight end. So that was the pivot point of if we passed on Waller. If we took Waller, then we knew we weren't going to get good quarterbacks, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, when in doubt, I like to have better quarterbacks and worse tight ends. That's just kind of how I like it, because you can play the ping pong weeks probably better a little bit at tight end. But Darren Waller after ADP was, I think, kind of the.
So I'll throw 2 things there. One is, yes, we could have gone Mahomes. It actually would have been right at his draft, maybe even a little tiny bit of value paired with the Juju here, gotten that stack going. I don't think that we would have, by drafting Darren, we say we're not drafting any QBs, because often you have some of these, Lamar to fall to this spot. That's fine. My big point is that because we did not draft wide receivers as elite ones, we knew we were going to be getting a ton and getting volume later on and getting guys on worse teams. So when we know that our later build is going to have a bunch of these guys like our Seahawks, like our Jets, like our Giants, then I'm more likely to say, okay, let me also stack with those late QBs as well. And so it's a bit more of a, okay, yeah, it's higher risk because we're taking these wide receivers on not good teams. But if you're going to do that, we may as well also take the QBs on those same not good teams. So if we went Mahomes, you pair with Juju, we then are going to have these bad, dusty teams, wide receivers later on too. But now we're not stacking with their QBs because we can't go 3 QBs because we went with the Mahomes early.
I'm with you. That was just, to me, where we felt weakest on our roster, just as an overall talent. It's certainly at that elite quarterback upside, because as Hayden said, maybe at best Derek Carr gets up there as the quarterback 6. So that was the pivot point for us, was Waller versus Patrick Mahomes, let's say in round 4.
And so if we went Mahomes, we would have had Mahomes here. We would have gone Juju here. We then probably would have been getting an MVS somewhere. We definitely would have been going for hey, KC, is now what we're making a major bet here. And
then
grabbing
we would have taken
those-
3 late tight ends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the other reason why I like, if I'm going to be punting a position, it's going to be tight end, because all it takes is 1 or 2 injuries at the top of the tight end group this year for all those. Even if it's just the tight end 2s aren't scoring more points themselves, it's all relative. And for the quarterbacks, there's no way Josh Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Kyler, everyone's getting hurt, but just one injury from Kelsey or Mark Andrews, all of a sudden that tight end position is looking as bad as it has at the top end since probably the last 5-10 years. So that's why I think this year's particularly, I like the tight ends. I think they project better personally, but I also think that the top end of the class is more fragile than it's been in a long time.
Right. And I think the corollary to that is, though, that actually makes me want to draft an elite tight end even more. It makes me want to go barbell, either elite tight end or no, because if Darren Waller is, if Kelsey and Andrews get hurt and now Waller's the only one producing elite, you have such a huge jump on the rest of the field. I think what you're saying, and I agree, is like, hey, is that middle ground where the Dalton Schultz type, where Dalton Schultz isn't going to have that much of a gap between him and all these other tight ends. Yeah. More likely not, but yeah. I think that's a good point. Let's take a look at someone who was in the draft room, who was drafting as well. I know a few of you were out there. Shoot, put your draft number in the order, and I'll randomly pick one, because I know we got a few of you that were in the draft. BFFL, CG, a few others as well. So let's see who wants their draft reviewed. Josh, Hayden. When we see some numbers pop in chat,
let's do CGs.
Okay.
Because BFFL, I know that he accidentally took the Mahomes in that spot, and then also took Aaron Rodgers.
Right,
so I think we can be more fair to Chris G. Or number 5. Number 5 is 1-2 from Jason.
Okay. Yeah, go with CG. So you started there, and they had a Jamar Chase and a Mike Evans, 5 wide receivers in the first 6 picks with a great value on Alvin Kamara. I kind of like reviewing the drafts a little easier this way.
Agree.
Okay. So we got Dak and Tannehill. I think from a QB wise, not that bad. Let's one guy with upside. I still think Tannehill's a decent value, getting drafted that late and still has the ability to produce on the ground. From a stacks wise, you've got the Robert Woods and the Nick Westbrook-Akine. James Washington for the late stack for Dallas there, as well as the Dalton Schultz. So decent stacks here. Definitely heavy on the wide receivers after starting off with 4 or 5 of the first 6 picks. That's probably my main hesitation for this team right now.
If you have 5 good ones, I think you can literally stop at 6 or 7. That's what the data showed last year. Just based off my intuition, that kind of lines up with it. And I think that's why 0 RB outside of the second round running backs going to the moon last year. I think the other reason why 0 RB, the win rates and stuff are so bad, is because all those 0 RB teams keep drafting 9-10 wide receivers. You got to stop.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it had to do with, Chris was kind of in that line of okay, but I want to stack. And so I have James Washington, I have Nick Westbrook, let me stack for my team. But agreed, when you have Chase, Evans, Juju, London, Woods, Davis, I would have stopped at those 7. With these 2, I'd probably say
Austin Hooper instead.
That's a good one. I was going to say at least one running back, and maybe that's a Hassan Haskins aspect, as we talked about, where this team's better if Henry gets hurt, because then you're using Tannehill and Robert Woods more and throwing in the Austin Hooper. That would have been a great, I think, last 2 picks, Haskins and Hooper. But overall, I like the stacks, and it looks like Chris definitely got some good value on a lot of those picks. Love that Kamara value, and then a few others as well I was seeing. So nice there. Yeah, Rashad Penny, even though we didn't take him, the 2 guys that we were considering. So this was awesome, though. This was a lot of fun. Josh, Hayden, thank you for joining me. The rest of you in chat, I know we had 130 strong throughout the show, so it was great to have you all here. Like the stream, subscribe, and what's on store for you guys with some content? I know you guys are obviously doing your live streams, and there's a lot going on. So what can the people look forward to?
We have a stream at 3:00 today that Hayden and I have thoroughly prepared for. We're just going to do a tier list of all the NFL offenses. How we've kind of been doing this, to be honest with you, Justin, and be honest with the audience. We do a ton of preparation for one show and a little less preparation for the second show. Our big shows have been these ranking shows for positions. So we've already done quarterback. We've already done tight end. Most likely on Thursday, we'll be running backs. And the next week will be wide receivers too. So that's like basically all of our thoughts on like the top 24 or 36 or whatever at each and every position. We really dive in about like 3 to 7 minutes on any of those players, right, Hayden?
Yep. And then Monday night, we do draft streams. On Friday, I'll be doing some more draft streams. Sometimes I do like one-off content too. But yeah, today we're doing like stacks. Best offenses, just like pure stacks. That's it.
There'll be some takes. And filming a new commercial too tomorrow. So like hopefully all of you at some point will see a new thing on your televisions rather than the same one that's been playing for the last 6 months. So
always makes me smile when we get to see Josh's face just on the big screen.
There you go.
Well, this has been awesome. And one more plug I'll throw. So for those in the NFT space, Club Top Shot is doing a live show from the Underdog offices this evening. So I'm in a hotel room in New York right now. I will be heading over to the Underdog offices in a few hours to watch that. Peter Overzet and all that gang. So tune in there. Otherwise, for Josh, for Hayden, for our friends at Underdog, at the Owners Club, and Establish the Run, it was great hanging out with all of you. And we will see you again on Thursday. See you all later.